time. This is Lotus FM with Trivash keeping you company here on Talk at 7. And we are discussing employment opportunities, how to land a job, and workplace ethics. To unpack this, we've brought in the professionals for you tonight. Joining us live in studio is Adrian Pillay, a specialist recruitment consultant specializing in IT and engineering recruitment. He is also a regular speaker and career advisor. Now, joining us in studio 2 is chartered accountant, governance, risk and compliance specialist and founder of Boss Babes South Africa, Kovini Mudli. Kovini, hi, welcome to Lotus FM. How are you?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. Are you looking forward for the conversation that we are going to be having about employment and governance and work ethic and all of that? And
Absolutely.
giving us some great tips too.
No,
Right?
absolutely.
That is amazing. Now, Kovini, we've just marked Workers' Day. Now, when you reflect on it this year, what stands out the most to you about the current state of workers' rights in the country?
I think Workers' Day is more than just a public holiday. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to make sure that everyone in the employment space is honoring a sense of lawfulness within the organization. And, South Africa has one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. And I think for me, there's also a stark reality on the other side where some individuals may find themselves within workspaces where, the environment may not ideally be healthy for them. And that really comes from a place of me being a mentor, being part of various governance and risk forums, and also my presence on LinkedIn, whereby I try and bring in as much realism as possible to the future leaders of South Africa.
Adrian, you know where you know that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I know you do because LinkedIn was
LinkedIn.
there.
Well, I've been promoting it shamelessly, right, for the last hour or so. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to have that. Obviously, the network and using the platform for all the good that it can.
Now, Kovini, you have said that Workers' Day is about confronting the present, right?
Yes.
So, what are the uncomfortable truths that South Africans need to face right now?
I think for me, the biggest risk at this point, leaning on my expertise, is around workplace culture. And our organization's actually driving a healthy culture, a proper tone at the top, an effective, bottom-up approach, and an approach that encourages transparent reporting for whistleblowers or just in general for anyone who wants to speak up on something that isn't quite right.
So, you do know that South Africa has a very progressive labor law, right? On paper. But why do you think that there's still such a gap then between policy and people's lived experiences?
Absolutely. I don't think we have a policy a problem in South Africa. And I lean on my experience for this. It is more of an implementation gap that we have, whereby you've got the most amazing policies, but there isn't the right type of culture from a governance, risk, compliance perspective to actually drive and follow an organization's own policies, let alone the labor laws rather that prevail within South Africa.
Adrian, organization culture. I'm looking at you because it's your department.
It is. It is. Well, kind of, yes. But I said before that we take a very advisory, consultative approach in our roles as recruiters. And what I mean by that is we don't just advise candidates on how to improve their CVs or improve their LinkedIn profiles. We also advise employers, so our
Right.
clients. We have those conversations, or sometimes those tough conversations, to say, wait, if a position is now available or vacant, or we need to fill this vacancy, why? And we
Why?
ask, what happened, previous employer, what's the culture like? So we ask those very tough questions on what's going on in the company, because our job is to find talent, right? And we don't want to be in a position where we're doing that candidate a disservice by putting them in a bad company.
Well, that's
So-
a great approach, Adrian.
So-
Make sure that you keep on doing that, right?
Absolutely.
Lovely.
So
Yeah.
so we definitely want to advise and be consultative in our approach,
Right.
and yeah, so exactly what you said, Kovini. It's very important. As much as we have those policies, its implementation.
Now, Kavini, from your experience in governance and compliance now, where do you think organizations are falling short the most? Is it leadership? Is it accountability, culture?
I think it's a mix of everything, but ultimately, your culture in an organization, what we refer to as a tone at the top, is where it all starts. So, if you've got a healthy set of leadership values that individuals below leaders can see them following every day, that means the beliefs, the right mindset, an ethical approach to disclosure, transparency, then you will see that that is what we call setting the tone of a healthy workplace culture. And if you see that, if people in the organization feel that, it's not just, the marketing or what you're putting out in press releases, if they actually feel that, then that is going to start to drive a sense of accountability, pride within your organization, and people are going to look up to the leadership as role models, which I think is where some of the best companies that I've worked for had that in place and had it in place very, very strongly.
You talk about role models here, Kavini. Do you feel that women often face retaliation when they speak up, and why is integrity sometimes punished in the workplace?
That's a really great question. I think we've seen people who've spoken up and their sad demise thereafter. So that's not something that we can ever ignore. I think you need to just, as they say, read your room, but read your culture in your organization. If you're in a culture that is stifling, that wants to hide things under the carpet, that doesn't value transparency, then just know that if you choose to speak up, it may not end very well. So I think it's very important to spend a few months, at least 6 months in any organization, to identify how do things work. Is there an ethical reporting line? Is there a whistleblower line? How confidential is information actually treated? And those are all the things that you need to assess before speaking up on an issue.
No, we're also talking, a lot about work ethics here tonight on the show. So, Kavini, what do you think, right, is some of the more subtle or systemic forms of bullying that people might not even realize is even happening to them?
Yeah. I get this a lot. I think for me, we are living in a digital world, which has its good and its bad side. From a digital perspective, I think these days it's very easy to send an email, send many emails, start to take actions, via email, almost I want to say like a cyber bully. And, often an employee receiving those emails may just think, oh, there's a, shift in the room, there's a shift in tone. I often get people coming to me to say, my manager just stopped liking me. And that's where you need to start to do a bit of a root cause for yourself and look at a trend. Because I think in risk, and especially in governance, one of the key factors that we look at is a pattern or a trend. And being able to piece that together for yourself to say, okay, I've noticed I'm now sidelined from meetings. Now I see another email. It's a little harsh. Address it sooner rather than later is my advice. And also consult a labor lawyer, which I think is very important in today's world.
Now, we often hear this, right, Kavini, that HR is not your friend. What is your take on this?
I think I have worked for some incredible companies that embed ethical leadership across the entire value chain. And the opposite is also true. I have experienced cultures where, we think HR is our agony aunt. We can go out there, cry our heart out, and they're going to save us. But the sad reality is that very much like myself, who manages risk, HR's job is to manage risk within an organization. They are paid by the company. They don't have a real sort of allegiance towards you, so I think that's very important to note. And I wouldn't advise going out there and pouring your heart out. I would advise, though, consulting with a labor lawyer or your union to better place the positioning with what you're going to put through to HR, because often things are not very confidential, and that can lead to actually more turmoil in the workplace.
So, Kavini, a lot of employees are afraid, to report issues sometimes. So, what should be done then to protect these whistleblowers?
Well, I think there is a protection bill that is still awaiting to be finalized. I would really like to see that happen as soon as possible. I know that it's gone out for consult, But I think we need that as soon as it is possible so that we are able to protect people who want to speak up, be it in the private sector or entities that represent public interest. But I also believe that if you're in a certain space where you can see that when you speak up, there's going to be a problem. Sometimes it's your gut feel, sometimes it's, understanding your environment a bit better. I honestly believe that no job for me is worth your life.
Of course.
And I say that with seeing what we've seen over the last few months, when people have, whistle blown or chose to speak up, or it's just been a very sad
And it's
set
not
of
just
events.
even in the workplace. I mean, it's everywhere. In every setting. You find even in courtrooms too, right? So not just where you're working, but you could be working, but someone else may have it in for you,
Right.
even if it's outside of the organization, just depending on what type of work you do.
Right.
And also many people, Kavini, may sometimes frame workplace abuse as a governance failure. How should leaders start thinking differently about this issue?
I think when someone speaks up about workplace bullying, harassment, even sexual harassment, many times it's looked at in a little bubble and they call it an HR matter. But for me, the root cause often lies a lot deeper. It is about getting down to why is this actually happening? Why are all your governance layers, almost failing for someone to now be bullied or pushed out of a workspace? The greater question is around, your internal control functions. Are they designed correctly and are they working as intended? And that comes back to a company being able to follow the legislation as well as their own policies that are defined by them and often approved by the board.
We often see, many people applying for jobs in
Yes.
desperation, in
Yes.
the job market, making workers now much more vulnerable to exploitation, or even the violation of rights. Are you seeing this? Do you see this?
Yeah. We are in very tough economic conditions. I know of a lot of people that have the requisite qualifications but do not have employment, which is really, it breaks my heart to see people studying for 7 or 8 years, and even doctors, protesting and wanting a job. So I think my advice is, if you're offered a job, take it, guys. The truth of the matter is that it's always easier to move jobs if you're employed versus if you're not. So take it, but at the same time, be alert for any red flags that you may have encountered during the interview process. Make sure you've got, a labor lawyer on hand. Make sure that you're supported from a mentorship and a coaching perspective, because, I think those are really important aspects to support you on this journey. Like I say, the market is really terrible at this point.
So, as an industry professional, Kavini, what does ethical leadership look like in action beyond policies and statements in your view?
I think ethical leadership for me is something that you feel, that your employees below you feel, that you are respected because of the way you lead, what you stand for, rather than a title. I think often we can get very immersed into title and a level, and for me it's very important that you are respected for your skills and qualification, number one, and number two, that the people around you, those that you work with, those that report into you, can see you actually, because often companies have a value chain, or the 7 values that we subscribe to. If people can actually see, your employees themselves can see that and feel it and see, you don't tolerate bullying, you don't tolerate harassment, this is the consequence management of that. That is where ethical leadership starts. It starts at the top, and ideally it should be filtering downwards into every level within the organization.
Let's keep it on the top then for now, Kavini, right? Let's talk about the leaders.
Right.
The leaders that may be listening to the show right now who want to do better. What would you suggest would be some of the first practical steps that they should be taking almost, immediately?
Number one for me is that you need to understand your company's culture. And sometimes it's not very easy for leaders to embrace this because often the results are not great. So I would say start with a survey, almost like a scorecard where people can firstly feel free to actually rate those according to the way they actually feel, and that again can only be done in a safe space or a relatively healthy environment, and use that to move forward. Use that to look forward in terms of, we've gotten a whole lot of people that have said they don't feel like ethics is embedded, for example. They don't feel like risk is embedded. Those are things where, often symbolizes a sort of low risk maturity within an organization. So for me, it would be very important for leaders to set the tone at the top, run your surveys, keep the communication channels opened, make sure you have an honest, ethical, space for people to vent the way they're feeling. Also, offer them counseling services. I think everyone is just going through a lot in the world right now. It may not always be related to work, but have that safe space where people can feel safe enough to come to a manager and say, I'm not feeling well, or this week is not good for me. Some of the best companies that I've worked for have really embraced the fact that your employees are not just numbers, they are actual human beings, and it's important to respect them in that way.
Definitely. So for employees then who may be feeling stuck right now,
Right.
or maybe even silenced too, what advice would you give them?
I would say never forget your power. I know it's very cliche, but sometimes if you're in an environment that isn't necessarily healthy, you tend to, I want to say, downward spiral. So you have a negative thought and then more negative thoughts, and it can lead to some very severe conditions. So I think it is very important for, if you're not feeling good, if you're constantly in a state of anxiousness, fear, is to seek help from a professional person, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, for example, and be able to talk through your issues. And I think it's very, very important for us to, as leaders as well, support employees, genuinely support employees. After you speak up about something, you should never be retaliated against or now start to feel like, you're being pushed out of the space. So I think employees as well, we need to take our lives into our own hands and charter our own growth plan. Or if it's not a growth plan, that you see yourself in a company but you don't see growth for yourself, then also to be able to successfully strategize on your exit out of that particular space, and find something that aligns with your value, your self-worth, and something that makes you happy.
So then what do you think real progress would look like when we commemorate Workers' Day next year?
I think for me, I would like to see a lot more lawfulness in companies, and a lot more compliance with our Code of Harassment, Code of Good Practice laws, the Labor Relations Act. There's a lot. And I think it's very important that those elements of law, it's not a negotiable element. It's something that every company needs to be compliant with, whether you're in the public sector or in the private sector. You as an employer has an obligation to create a healthy and a safe space for your employees. And if they raise issues, you also have an onus to make sure that you are able to protect them effectively under the Duty of Care Act. And I think that's what I want to see more of. I want to hear more stories that are more positive, and I want to hear about companies that are actually taking this seriously, because having a poor work culture is probably one of the biggest risks in any organization, and you often wouldn't find it on your risk register or your risk profile. It's there, but it isn't really addressed properly.
Because it isn't a policy really, right?
Yes.
It's something that you create.
Absolutely. You create through your leadership, the people you hire, the type of leaders that you bring into the organization, how you treat people when they're not feeling their best. Those are all signs of assessing a company's culture.
Definitely. So, South Africa, we're asking you tonight because we'd like to hear from you. Are you job hunting or perhaps stuck in a toxic work environment? You can let me know on 071 613 7803. And of course, we will ask the experts joining us in studio here tonight. And that is, of course, Adrian and Kuvini Now, Kavini, in today's job markets, people are increasingly accepting high effort, low reward jobs just to stay employed, right?
Yes.
So, do you think, I asked Adrian this question earlier as well, is this shifting power towards employers and weakening workers' ability to negotiate fair conditions?
I think certainly there are a lot of companies that we call it in corporate language lowballing. So you see someone without a job, and suddenly you decide to offer them the lowest possible package. And I think, unfortunately, our economy is contributing to this, where there's just such a limited supply of jobs that, the more bang for your buck that an employer can get, it seems to be going that way. I really hope that the shifts and changes around, and that people with skills and knowledge and the papers, as they call it, are, paid accordingly, paid in line with market, and also respected for the value that they bring to organizations.
Definitely. So, Adrian, we are hearing a lot about culture here